Welcome everybody to an incredibly special episode of Lee Landsmeet and a pivotal moment on my channel. Today I am joined with the amazingly talented Dark Horse Dragon Age comic writers who've brought us Knight Errant, Deception, Blue Wraith, and most recently, Dark Fortress. I'm very privileged to introduce Nunzio DeFilippis and Christina Weir. How are you both doing today?
We're doing well. It's a nice day. We're at home with our dog. All is good.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining me today. And honestly, I am just going to get straight into this because I know I have a lot of questions as a hardcore Dragon Age nerd. So for everyone listening, I'm going to be asking Nunzio and Christina many questions ranging from the creative process, BioWare's involvement, heavy spoilers on lore, story, character details, the future, and everything in between on the Dragon Age comics. I'll have timestamps linked for each category down below. First up though, let's start with some icebreakers just so we can get to know Nunzio and Christina a little bit. And I think just straight off the bat, as specific or as non-specific as you'd both like, what does Dragon Age mean to you both?
Well, I play a lot of video games, and there are certain franchises that are my favorite. Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and Suikoden are the three for me that I could go back and play any of the games at any time and discover something new, or even if I don't, just dive back in.
Yeah.
There's a comfort food to it, but there's also, I think, for me, Dragon Age, much like Mass Effect, plays with a sort of gray morality that I think a lot of people are drawn to the gray morality, but I've never been drawn to the gray morality. The morality in Dragon Age is pretty clear to me.
Yeah.
Like I don't side with the Templars. I never side with the Templars.
Oh,
I can't imagine siding with the Templars. But what the game does really well is it makes me care about people who do side with the Templars.
Right.
It makes me care about characters who I fundamentally disagree with. So the morality is black and white for me.
Yeah.
But the people in the world see it as gray, and it doesn't make me hate them.
Yeah.
Normally somebody because I view the Templars as fairly oppressive to the mages. So anybody on the oppressive side, you would assume that I would hate them as a character. But I don't. I like a lot. I mean, some of them I hate. Meredith I hate. But But harder to hate Cassandra.
Colin? What about Colin?
Or Colin. Well, Colin's tricky. I feel like Colin redeems himself, but mostly we're told he redeemed himself. I would have loved to see him suffer a little bit more for his. I mean, maybe it's me holding that first game's end slide where he went crazy and murdered people. Maybe I'm holding that against him, but I wanted to see him earn it a little bit more.
I feel like I blocked that out because Cullen's usually my romance in the third game. So I sort of forget what he did in the first game.
He doesn't do it. It's only mentioned in the slide, but he does in the first game implore that you should slaughter every mage in the tower.
Oh yeah.
And in the second game, he's kind of okay with Meredith with everything until Meredith goes after Hawk, and he's like, "Wait a minute, we were supposed to spare Hawk." I'm like, but every other mage was okay. So I wanted to see a little bit more of that in 3. I loved what we got with Cullen in 3, but I always felt like it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. I loved watching him sort of beat the Lyrium addiction. That really made me feel for him. But I wanted to see him recognize that maybe he was wrong. I wanted to be able to play a mage inquisitor who really took it to him, and I think the dialogue options didn't give me a chance to be like, "Hey, screw you for what you said."
Yeah, it would have been nice if you could have had that closure, especially with a romancing mage, Colin Mance. So what does Dragon Age mean to you, Christina?
I mean, I love the story. It's interesting. I'm not quite the video game nerd that Nunzio is, but he very much got me into the BioWare games, and I think I just love the characters and story in the world and how much narrative effort really goes into the whole experience. So it's a great place to lose myself in all the characters and the stories there.
Absolutely. So how has each of your relationship changed with Dragon Age since creating these comics?
Those big 3 game franchises were my big 3 before we started writing these comics.
Hell yeah.
So I would love to write for Mass Effect. I wish there was some place where I could write for Suikoden, but because we've written in superhero comics and Superman is very important to me, and we've gotten a chance to write Superman, and Dragon Age, getting to write Dragon Age is in that same category. Putting words in Fenris's mouth specifically felt very much like getting a chance to write Superman. In our X-Men run, we only got to put a limited amount of words in Captain America's mouth, but we
similar experience.
Even so, you've done it. Even so, you can say that you've actually wrote for Captain America.
So it didn't change the relationship for me in terms of valuing the franchise. It has changed. They always say you shouldn't know how the sausage is made or whatnot. So it has changed in that we got a glimpse behind the scenes. But in all honesty, every dealing we had with BioWare was a really strong creative. It reinforced our notion that the people making the games care about story as much as people making comics or books or movies do. And with games, there's so much more that has to go into it, like gameplay. So you could be forgiven for putting story at a sort of lower on your list of priorities, but they don't. And so it hasn't changed as much as it's reinforced a little bit.
Well, I was going to say, I think the biggest difference is experiencing Dragon Age as a fan versus experiencing Dragon Age as a creator. And by virtue of the way these games are designed, you're in the mindset of Hawk, the Inquisitor. I was like, but you're in a very first person point of view, and everything that happens in those worlds is about your experience to it, as opposed to when you're writing the comics, you have to take a step back and be more third person and look at the world on a more even footing and give more time and attention to other characters and see it from the outside almost, instead of being right in the thick of things.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that leads to is this sort of the fan connection with their choices.
Yeah.
And when we have to write beyond our choices.
Yeah.
So, we're writing Fenris, but we can't write Fenris as if he's the person that Hawk romanced exclusively, despite the fact that I don't believe after one time, because we've played Dragon Age 2 a lot of times, but the first time it was Anders.
Oh, right.
I was so angry. I was so angry.
But every other playthrough after that Christina's been a part of, it's been Fenris.
Yeah.
But we have to write a Fenris who may not have been romanced.
Yeah.
And then, as a fan, you can imagine scenarios, and then they lived happily ever after. And then you get Dragon Age Inquisition, and Hawk is off elsewhere, and you're like, why isn't Fenris with you? And he's like, well, he would have died to protect me, so I didn't give him the choice. Which the minute you realize that that's abusive, that's a horrible way to treat a former slave. Like, oh, I'm going to give you no agency in a decision because you might get hurt. I'm going to treat you like a child. I'm going to take the decision away, and I'm just going to disappear. So we extrapolated from that the worst case scenario, right? But I think a lot of fans are like, no. They're still in communication. And as soon as Inquisition is done, and I would never, ever leave Hawk in the Fade, they're going to get back together, and they're going to continue living happily ever after and raising their babies, or whatever headcanon they've created that fits with the choices they made in Dragon Age 2. We can't write around those choices.
Absolutely.
We can literally only write around, romanced or not.
Yeah.
Fenris doesn't have that group of friends around him anymore. And so we had to go, how would that make Fenris feel? And it took us to a place that made him bitter again. Like everything he'd learned in the second game was a little bit unlearned. And I think, some fans got frustrated, like, but what? All of that work that I did with Fenris, you undid it. And I was like, well, no, we didn't undo it. Inquisition undid it.
It's BioWare's fault.
So we have to sort of step back, because we would never want that to be Fenris's mind today. We want a happy Fenris. We want Fenris and Hawk to live happily ever after. And we, just like most of these fans, when we played Inquisition, we sort of took the events of Inquisition and smoothed it out so that they could be happily ever after Inquisition. And of course, we did not leave Hawk in the Fade.
Who did you leave in the Fade then?
It depends. Almost every time that we play, because we always leave Alistair on the throne. Almost every time it's like, Stroud.
I'm
like, too bad, Stroud, but I don't really know you, so bye. You
Sorry,
seem like a
Stroud.
Decent guy in the 3 scenes we got with you, but there's not really a big sense of loss.
No,
And it is a Grey Warden mess to fix, so it makes sense to leave Stroud.
It does. I was unfortunate where my hero for Eldon is king or prince consort, so I had Alistair or Hawk, and it's like, screwed. So I did pick Alistair because I do love Hawk. You can't leave Hawk in the Fade. Like, even though, as you say, people getting upset about, not writing for a romance Fenris, for me, it's also similar to, obviously, Alistair's on the throne, and therefore you have to work with canon. While I would like my prince consort to be talking to Sir Aaron or whatever, obviously that's not the canon, is it? The canon is, it's King Alistair, and you just have to go with that.
And the thing is, when we write these, we write them with the same attitude that BioWare has about the sort of official quote. And I put official in quotes because I think people get upset when we say it's official, because it's not truly official. You read this comic, and if your canon is that you have a prince consort on the throne, right, then that is who the letter is to at the end of Dark Fortress. And the flashbacks that show King Alistair are flashbacks that instead show your Prince Consort.
Hell
or
yes. Hell yes.
You just make the adjustments. The hardest one is the people who are like, well, this story doesn't work for me because I killed Fenris. And I'm like, okay, well,
Well,
why would you do that?
Why would you do something so disgusting?
But okay. And in my mind, actually, I know that the official BioWare stance would be then the story exists without Fenris.
Right.
Like
right.
that Blue Wraith would have a different former servant of Marius, who also got put through it. But in my mind, I instead view it like this. You give Fenris back to Danarius because you are a terrible, terrible human being, right? If you do that, Varric sneaks out right after that scene is over and frees Fenris, and then Fenris kills Daenerys. So we're right back on track, except that Fenris really hates Hawke.
yeah, back to square one. But now Fenris hates Hawke.
If you side with the mages and you haven't gotten Fenris all the way up on friendship or all the way up on rivalry, so you have to face Fenris and he dies there, then as the fighting is going on, Varric sneaks over and smuggles Fenris to medical safety in the middle of the battle, and Fenris survives. So in my mind, Varric is the cure-all. Anybody that you kill, Varric saves, because he likes them all. So I think he can smooth most of the lore out. That's my headcanon.
No, absolutely. And even in the trailers so far, we're already seeing Varric introduce the next hero. And I suppose segueing into my next question, how excited are you both for a Dragon Age 4, I should say?
Very.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I think the real challenge is not getting too excited.
Yeah.
Because I think we all can sort of read the tea leaves and see that it's going to be a little bit longer than we would have liked. I mean, honestly, if it had come out a few years ago, it was longer than we would have liked. But the thing is, we get mad when these games are rushed and then they don't. Like, I still remember Knights of the Old Republic 2 and how upset people were about how it was rushed and all the pieces that they found in the code that would have made for a better story. I want them to do this as well as possible. And if that means I got to wait a few more years, then I got to wait a few more years. I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. I'm in the same mindset of I would rather have a polished game than a rushed game. I would rather it be nice and polished rather than rushed and it's here next year. I would rather spend the time on it and work on creating the best game they possibly can. There's no rush. There really isn't. It's already been 7 years since Inquisition. We can wait a little bit longer. And also, your guys' comics has helped with the wait too. You know, that if people are really, they want the Dragon Age content, go read some comics. Go read the books again,
And that has been, I think, what has been most satisfying for us is to know that that's the role that we fill, is keeping people excited. Like, the last thing we would want is for the time it takes them to put out a good game. And I get it, teams were diverted to this game or that game, so it's easy to get pissed off at this game or that game.
And we had a pandemic.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, I choose to view this as all time that was spent so that they could make multiple games that we could enjoy. And now it's this one. And if we're the people who keep the fans excited about Thetis, then that's a good role to have.
On the other hand, Autumn has no patience. She wants the game now.
Well, that's my next question. How is Autumn doing? How old is she? She's 4, right?
So her age is a bit of a mystery. She's a rescue. And they told us when we got her that she was 1, and the vet thought that maybe she was 3. And so that was 4 years ago. So she's anywhere between 5 and 7 years old.
She's a part Chihuahua, and these small dogs have teeth issues.
Right.
And her teeth were not great. And I think that's why they thought she might be older. We've now had a couple of bad teeth pulled, poor little girl.
Aww.
And she had her teeth cleaned, so that hopefully won't happen for a while.
Oh, good. She's
got the energy still of a puppy. So we think we lean towards interpreting it as more like 4 than 7. Because at 7, she'd be slowing down, and this is a dog with no intention of slowing down.
She's still going crazy.
She thinks she's Mabari sized.
I just recently got a French bulldog, and he is 4 months, so I understand the whole puppy craze. I just hope he stops biting though, because he's still so young and just nipping everything, and you're like, okay, which point did I stop biting?
Are you getting him lots of teething toys?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. He's
then you'll have to probably wait till the end of the first year before the nipping really goes away. But as long as you're teaching him where to properly channel his biting energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think going into the creative process, and this is actually just a proper selfish question I wanted to ask. Sorry, everyone who wants Dragon Age. As someone who doesn't have a clue about the ins and outs of the comic industry, yet has a great interest in following a writing profession, how did you both land in comics, and what advice would you give to anyone seeking a potential career like that in the future?
Well, I think we both studied screenwriting.
Right.
Film and TV were the forms. Like when we went to film school, and this we're not going to go into too much detail about what it was because we're old.
We're old. Yeah.
But film schools were heavily focused on film, and it was hard to get people to pay attention to television. That'll tell you how long ago it was. Now in film school, film and TV pretty much dominate, and it's hard to get people to pay attention to comics. Right. Or to web series or to podcasts. And these are places where people absolutely should be paying attention if you want to create stories or games for that matter. Those are harder to find in film schools. But when we were in film school, it was mostly film. And we were both, I think, very drawn to TV and thought of ourselves as thinking outside the box just by going to TV. So I grew up a comic book fan. Christina did not.
I did not, no.
And so we were friends. We went to college together. We were friends, and I tried to introduce her to comics that way. But it was really our friend, Greg Rucka, who started writing comics. And at that point, she was like, oh, because I wasn't writing comics at that point. I was still writing film and TV. But now we had a friend who was writing comics, and she was like, I want to check those out. Yeah. And so then I was suddenly like, here's my entire pile of childhood comics. Please start with these. And I think I scared her off. But even then, we weren't necessarily thinking of writing comics. And certainly she wasn't thinking of writing comics. And so we started writing together. We started dating, and then we started writing together. And Greg asked me if he wanted me, if I wanted him to introduce me to people at DC and to write for superhero comics. And I was like, of course. So I started down that path. So we were writing together. Christina and I were writing together on everything but comics. And so then we wrote a feature film screenplay called Skinwalker that Greg read and said, this would be even better as a comic. And horror comics are hard to pull off, but we took his advice and we met Oni Press, the people at Oni Press, the various editors at Oni Press, and started a relationship that we've had with them to this day. We're really still connected at Oni Press, and probably will continue to do comics through Oni Press. But it was the work we did at Oni Press that made Marvel turn around. It was actually Skinwalker that made Marvel turn around and say, hey, would you like to write superhero comics? It wasn't the work I did at DC. I did like one issue at DC through Greg's introduction. It was the stuff we published at Oni that got attention at Marvel. And then Christina made the choice like, all right, now I've read enough superhero comics. I want in on superhero comics. And so then we were writing everything together. But amazing. So I think you have to come at stories visually to really write comics. So I think screenwriting is excellent training, but I know prose writers who write novels or short stories who've been able to make the jump. It's just a little harder because prose is much more
relies on words.
Yeah.
And you learn quickly. I mean, when we go back and look at our first comic, Skinwalker, we so overwrote that they had to shrink the font down on the dialogue balloons because so much text that was covering up the art. And you really learn when writing comics about pulling back. Like you can put all this stuff on the page and then really pulling it back and letting the art drive it and just letting the dialogue kind of enhance it.
The greatest vanity of any comic writer that you will see is the comic writer being like, I create the comic, and then the artist brings it to life. No. Yeah. The artist creates the comic. They just do it with a blueprint that you help create. And when you think you create the comics, you think just like in other forms, your words are the most powerful tools, and they're not. When you write comics, you can, if you do it right, you learn your words are always not the best tool. It's a good training for a screenwriter because screenwriters will overwrite dialogue too. Like everybody wants to hear how I make the characters talk. It's like, no, everybody wants to see the movie. Nobody says I want to go hear a movie.
It's making me think of like Vaea when Francesca's dad died. She could totally have a very emotional monologue, but just that one shot of Vaea holding her crying is impactful enough. That's all you needed. And even then I don't know what the word is, but the screenplay of the visuals of like Castellum Tenebris, there are two servants behind, and it's like, are they elven servants? What are they? Who are they? And even like the jewelry in Ventus, it's all these little details that add so much to the lore and the universe that tell even more than just the words, and I think that's what the beauty about it is really in comics.
It really is. And your job is to put the pieces in place and then step back and let the artist do the magic and make the comic. We love how much attention these Dragon Age comics have gotten us, but Fernando is the person that should be getting all of the praise. This run of comics, he's created a chunk of Thetis for us and a handful of characters. I think we wrote those characters well. I'm proud of how we wrote them, but I have no doubt that the reason that they resonate with people is the work he did.
Absolutely.
Because you're right, that comforting of Francesca moment and then the reverse moment in Dark Fortress.
Yes.
We put that in the script that this is going to happen, but it's all about, like, we had to know not to put any dialogue on that panel. We had to trust
visual
that he was going to do the storytelling there.
Even just the autumn fighting scenes, like that. Just when she goes to bite Shirallas as the red Wraith. Oh, just all of it.
There was a note that came from BioWare. I can't remember who it was at BioWare. It might have been Matt Goldman. I'm not sure about that. But gave a note to Fernando saying, I never thought I would be typing these words, but you draw the best decapitations I've ever seen. They're beautiful.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. So I suppose stepping into BioWare and the comics, what does the creative process for developing these comics look like? And at what point do you communicate with BioWare?
BioWare is involved heavily early on, like when we're plotting. They definitely want to get in there and make sure that the stories we're telling fit the world and represent what they're trying to do.
After that, when we start writing, they let us write. It's not like we have to check in with them when we're writing scripts. When the script is done, we send the script in and they'll give notes. But at that point, when they give notes, those notes are about the flow of the individual issue and not about big story notes, usually.
Right.
Unless it's come off the rails a little bit or it's not working, they're not tinkering with the story at that point. They do sort of true collaboration where we say, hey, we're going to tell this story. And they say, well, what if it's this? Or what if it's at this location? Or what if it's... And we sort of work it all out in advance. And then they kind of trust us to do the issue by issue plotting and the issue by issue writing. And then they only look at the scripts and say, hey, I think the visuals here could be this instead of that.
But when we were first sort of brought up to potentially take over the Dragon Age comics, it wasn't like they told us what story they wanted. We brought them, we sent them like 6 different ideas and to see if any of them sparked any interest for them. And the one they liked best was Knight Errant. And then we also had a pitch for Deception in there and they liked that one as well. But Knight Errant was their favorite. So that's what we focused on at first in developing that out.
And then so like they would tinker with Knight Errant. Like there was a lot of notes about Vaea and Sir Aaron and how they played out as characters. And in particular, Sir Aaron, they leaned heavy into the PTSD of and that the alcoholism and the telling of stories are both 2 different ways for him to cope with the stuff he's seen. And we had anchored that into Ostagar, and I think that really triggered something for them. And they were like, this is what would it be like to be a veteran of Ostagar and to still be dealing with the trauma of that. And then the other thing that they did was we had set Knight Errant initially, we set it in Ferelden.
Oh wow!
And Vaea was stealing the journal that was going to be stolen. It wasn't a journal yet. We were talking with them about what it could be that would have legs for the future or whatnot. That the Inquisition needed to steal something from Arl Tegan.
Oh wow!
So that's who she was supposed to steal
as opposed to Sebastian.
That was our pitch because Tegan had become a bit more confrontational about the Inquisition and trespasser. We sort of built on that and said, well, what if the Inquisition was like, we'll steal something from him? But they were like, let's move north.
Interesting.
Let's move north, and that's how we were like, okay, so this next game is going to be north, is it? So we were like, oh, are they stealing in Tevinter? And they were like, no, you don't have to go all the way north. Let's set it in Starkhaven, and that was them. And they were like, let's just transition the storytelling further north.
And that's how it eventually built up to then Inventus and Nerimenian.
So that call about Knight Errant was a lot of those types of things, digging into Sir Aaron, changing the location, and then we sort of did a deep dive and plotted all of that miniseries, and then we sent it to them. And then from then on, they just let us go issue by issue and gave us story notes, and they were pretty light notes. They were pretty happy with what we did. By and large, when we'd hit the script stages, every note we'd get from them would be a note we'd be like, oh, that makes sense, we're just changing that. They're really good and insightful about story, but a lot of their notes were pretty positive. It was a pretty fun, I remember there was one point, I think it was the 2nd issue of Dark Fortress, where we got a note back from BioWare that was like, this banter leading up to the battle is, and they just wrote out the words, chef's kiss. And we were just like, this is the greatest thing, like for the BioWare team to tell us that the banter was chef's kiss. We were just like, we've done it.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. I could never imagine, the professional writers like chef's kiss.
and it was that whole stretch of Vaea deciding she wants to free the dragon and Fenris telling her that you're going to get yourself killed, and I think that's what they were responding to.
So originally, Knight Errant was a 5-issue. How come Deception, Blue Wraith, and Dark Fortress were made into 3 issues?
Well, we don't necessarily want to spoil any publishing plans, but I will simply say that they were designed to go together in collected format. So that is our hope that will still happen. But that was, I think, the original thought process on the Dark Horse side. Like you've got that collection, the library edition collection that's got Mage Killer, which is 5, and Knight Errant, which is 5. And I think they wanted 3 more, but that could all collect together. So they wanted 3 that came close to 10. So 9 was a good fit. So they decided to go 3 issues each. And that was, of course, a challenge for us because they also said, and let's include deception in that story, but make it a story that built across 3 different miniseries up to something. And so we had to retool our idea for deception to shrink it down to 3 issues, but also now have it not just be a standalone about 2 dueling con artists, but instead bring in the larger stuff. And we made the conscious choice to fake out the readers and start it so it looked like it was Olivia and Calix's story.
Yes.
And then have Aaron and Vaea show up, and they're like, and the readers will be like, "Oh my God, this is the same story continuing."
Yes. I remember looking at the original cover and being like, "Oh, it's a brand new story about Olivia Pride," and then there's a dude called Calix. And then I remember, I think, so I'm a little bit sneaky. I looked at Fernando's Facebook page, and then I saw Vaea in the art, and I was like, "Oh, she's in it," and I was like, yes, it's a connecting story. But no, originally, it looked like it was like a spin-off.
Well, the thing is, we try when we write, we try to play with format a little bit to fit the kinds of stories we're telling. That was a con artist story that was built on lies. The whole story is supposed to be built on lies. So we wanted to up front trick the reader into thinking it was a completely different story and then pull them in so as to keep them off balance. And we put sort of voiceover style captions for Olivia at the start, knowing that we were planning to kill her. And that the characters that we were going to take away from that miniseries would be everybody but her. Because we really did have bigger plans for Calix than we wound up with doing. So the fact that Calix then later got removed made it even more of a deception, because it really, in the end, you're like, wow, that miniseries was about setting up Autumn and Francesca.
Yeah.
It was funny, though, because when we were writing Knight Errant, we were just writing Knight Errant. The discussion didn't come in till after that about doing the 3 more miniseries, and then when we plotted that, and they were all going to be part of a larger whole, but Dark Horse kind of kept the wraps on that, so every time a miniseries would end, we knew there was more coming, but Dark Horse didn't, it was always like, we're not going to announce it for a little while, so we're like, okay, we won't say anything.
And the thing is that all those miniseries ended with your princess is in another castle. Like they all, because we knew that it was 3 phases of the story that would get Vaea and Sir Aaron and the group that they had been traveling with to Tenebris. From the beginning of this story, we knew that this was going to end. Like the minute we got these 3 miniseries, the first thing we said was, we want Fenris.
Good.
Because in the initial meeting about Knight Errant, they talked, like, they were great. They were like, who do you want to use? And we said Fenris, but Knight Errant didn't seem like a story that fit Fenris.
Yeah.
So, and then we said Varric, and they were like, well, Varric fits Knight Errant, especially if you take our advice and set this in Starkhaven. And then we're like, and then we'll write Sebastian. So, but we knew, so we revisited Fenris right away, and we knew that Deception wouldn't have him. And then we were calling Blood Writing, which was the miniseries in the middle, would have him, and then it would end at what we were calling Fortress before we decided Dark Fortress was a better name.
I remember you commented on my video on Deception that I did just go, and you mentioned something about something meaning Dark Fortress, and it was hinted back in Deception. I think it was. I think it was actually even before you talked about Gaius. I can't remember, but you had hinted all the way back in, obviously from the fandom, we didn't have a clue, but all the way back then that you were going to Castellum Tenebris. So that was obviously always the end journey to end up there.
So the three parts of the story were going to be find out where this red lyrium weapon went, and that was the goal of Deception, and that was achieved. The second was find a way to it, because people don't tend to know where it is, especially outsiders. And then the third would be to storm the castle. That was always the goal, but Blue Wraith wound up in the middle, like in the way that we ultimately replotted it. People didn't realize that recruiting Fenris meant figuring out how to get there. So they were like, is this miniseries really just about recruiting Fenris? And so that one really felt like your princess is in another castle.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, those were the 3 phases. It was find out where, find out how to get there, and then go do it.
Yeah.
Those were the 3 miniseries as we originally plotted them.
I was going to ask this question later, but I may as well ask it now. Was this the reboot in the story between Deception and Blue Wraith?
Yes. Well, the blood writing that we just talked about.
Yeah.
That was the original version of what became known as Blue Wraith. And we had two completely different versions of it. Well, not completely. One completely different version of it than what you saw. And then one different in execution than what you saw. So we plotted Blood Riding as a completely different story. They gave us 3 miniseries to do this. We mapped out 3 stages. And then we went and started figuring out what the 3 pieces were going to be. And this was just us with a little bit of feedback from Dark Horse. BioWare, we hadn't turned any of this stuff in. And I don't know if you've seen on a message board somewhere, I sort of revealed that we originally had plans for Valena and Sigrun to be involved. That was the original version of Blood Riding.
Oh, wow.
And so Blood Riding was supposed to be the team goes to Fenris. There was no caravan to follow. There was no nothing. They were literally, we have to go to Tenebris. We don't know where Tenebris is, but we have the name Danarius attached to it. The Inquisition, via Varric, says, yeah, I know a guy who knows exactly where Danarius used to live. He's notoriously prickly. You'd better win him over because he's going to be your only way in. And so literally the plot of that story was, we need to convince Fenris to join this group. And Fenris is like, I'm busy. I've been busy rescuing slaves. And now I have discovered that somebody is taking the slaves that I rescued and experimenting on them to try to repeat the process that created me. And so if you help me stop that, I will go with you. I will show you where Tenebris is, and I'll do one better. I'll go with you because there shouldn't be anyone in there, and I'm going to kill him.
Yeah.
But first, you got to help me. And then they would go, and they would discover a bunch of former slaves being turned into wraiths by Valena and Sigrun.
Oh, wow. Oh, bloody hell.
Because Valena is starting to hear her calling, and she doesn't want to die. But she is presenting it to Sigrun as, this is a way to restore immortality to our people.
Oh my goodness.
And we at that phase, we were planning on marching up the hill to BioWare and saying, can we say that Fenris hasn't aged a day since he was turned into this Lyrium ghost? But we didn't ever get to run that by them because we scrapped the story before.
Yeah.
But slowly Sigrun would realize that Valena was only doing this because she was afraid to die. And she would switch sides and join the group. And then Valena would realize that she was wrong and march off into the deep roads to die.
Oh my! Oh damn!
And one of the former slaves who had volunteered, it turns out all these former slaves were not being experimented on. They were willing volunteers because they wanted immortality, because they wanted to impress Fen'Harel. By restoring the elves to immortality using this process.
That is amazing! Oh my goodness! And you said his name.
And so one of them was Shirallas.
So he was
Fenris was trying to rescue Shirallas, only to discover that Shirallas had volunteered to do this.
Oh, so he was an agent of Fen'Harel.
He was trying to impress Fen'Harel. He would have had the Elgarnon, Valislin, but so we plotted all that, and then as we were plotting the larger movements, we realized that what we wanted was stopping the process of creating Fenris, a new Fenris that would be infused with red lyrium, and that meant that needed to happen at Tenebris with the red lyrium weapon. And so we were like, well, then we can't solve that in the middle miniseries in order to recruit Fenris. Now, can we? So we scrapped that whole idea. So BioWare never saw that idea. That was just internal to us. Right. And so we threw that whole story out. And the one thing that we kept, well, the 2 things that we kept were the idea of the sarcophagus and the character of Shirallas, the character who would want this to happen. We retooled the history with Shirallas and wove it through the new version of Blood Riding. And so we created a new version of Blood Riding, and that new version of Blood Riding is much closer to what Blue Wraith was. In that one, everybody went in different directions. Vaea went to follow Francesca when she went to go find out what happened to her father, but Tessa went with her.
Oh, right.
And then Tessa and Francesca bonded in almost a big sister, little sister, and Tessa, the one who left her family behind to create a new path for herself, would be the one to help Francesca realize she needed to do the same thing. And Vaea's role in that would be to interact with Fenris. And then the men would continue following the caravan, and Autumn would stay with them. And that was how we originally divided it. And Sir Aaron and Marius would teach Calix that in order to become a hero, he would have to learn to fight.
Oh, wow.
And so it ended similarly, where the 2 groups came back together and Fenris joined up. But the differences were that Calix and Francesca, who would be fighting a lot more at the beginning, would kiss at the end and start towards a romance.
Very interesting.
and the horse that was healed was going to go to Calix because that's how he was going to engage in combat with the horse that refused to fight, Casse. That was all those moving pieces were in there. We even wrote the first issue. We turned in the first issue, and this is the only time in the 4 miniseries that BioWare did this. They read it and they were like, "Yeah, this doesn't work."
Okay.
There's too much going on, was basically what they told us.
Right.
You are trying to cram way too much in here.
And they said to us, "You've built a team that's too big.
Right.
And you're now trying to service all of them." And this miniseries, Fenris is the guy everyone cares about. You can't split the narrative 50-50. You've got to split the narrative more like 80-20 and really just focus on the team that's recruiting Fenris and then cut back to the other team a little bit. And so then at that point, we were like, all right, well, then the people going to get Fenris have to be the people that we're really building. Because they were like, "You've built too big a team." And we finally said to them, well, since we're going to kill Sir Aaron, because they knew that from the start. We told them that we were going to kill Sir Aaron from the start. It got harder for us to do it as we got closer, but that's a separate subject. But
Yeah.
we were going to kill Sir Aaron from the start. And we knew that Tessa and Marius were not going to stick around when this was over. That
And we
had-
also knew Calix didn't really have a place on the team.
well, we weren't sure yet, but we knew
Right.
that the core of the team was going to be a warrior, Fenris, a rogue, Vaea, and a mage, Francesca. We knew having that discussion, that would be the core team. And then we were like, everybody loves Autumn, and we love Autumn.
Yes.
So Autumn rounds it out as a traditional Dragon Age party.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then we were like, and Calix does what?
Yeah.
And so we realized then that if Marius and Tessa were borrowed characters and Calix was leaving, then the team recruiting Fenris needed to be Francesca, Vaea, and Autumn. And that what Blue Wraith really was doing in structuring the characters the way we did was telling you in advance who was staying in the party and who wasn't.
Absolutely.
The Fenris storyline is the party, the adventuring party when this is all over. Yeah. The group following the caravan for all different reasons. Calix realizes this life isn't for him. Tessa and Marius work by themselves and go off and do other things, and Sir Aaron was doomed to die. None of them were meant to continue on this journey after this. So that became the restructure. And at that point, we were becoming aware that there were changes in the sort of style of storytelling that BioWare wanted out of this, and heists were going to be less the case, and adventure tales were going to be more the case. And so storming the castle needed, because Calix's whole thing was he was going to talk people into letting them into the castle.
Right.
And that was why he was going to be there. And we were like, but Vaea can get them in the castle, and it's more visual and feels more like an adventure story if she's the one who does it. So we knew we had no purpose for Calix. So his whole purpose in that story was realizing, this isn't for me. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I talk to people. I don't like Fernando draws great conversation scenes, but he also decapitates people beautifully. So Calix doesn't necessarily belong in that story.
Yeah, we're gonna have some decapitations.
So then we rebuilt it, and that's the version that you saw. And then because of the change in the tone and genre, blood writing didn't feel as vital. And also blood writing was there initially because the Valislin being used by the sarcophagus as the map to etch in the Lyrium meant that title held more weight, but we'd moved that ritual to the next miniseries. So we were like, let's leave blood writing. And so we dropped Fortress as a name and made blood writing the final miniseries name. And Blue Wraith became the name because we proposed Lyrium Ghost first, and they both as a nickname for Fenris and as the title of the miniseries. And they were like, well, that's good for a power set. The people of Thetis don't talk about ghosts as much as they talk about wraiths. So then we were like, what about Blue Wraith instead? And then just in the category of small changes, whenever we get proofs of pages, they are entitled DA and then a Knight Errant KE, DAD for deception, DABW for Blue Wraith. So the next miniseries, the pages would have also said DABW for blood writing.
Yeah.
So we were like, nope, that's not it. So Dark Fortress.
Dark Fortress.
There you go. That's how it changed.
Oh, wow. I'm going to ask more change questions later on, but I want to talk a little bit more about the dynamic with BioWare. Do you guys share an internal lore wiki with the writers, or is that just you guys know what you're going to write about, and then it's just very much go ahead, or they just check whatever the lore that you're going to put in and they revise it? How does that work?
They tell us when we mess up the lore.
Okay.
They don't share the internal lore documents with us. They have shared with us a ton of concept art. So we know what design cues. So like if we look at something in the new advanced release art, we might be able to say, oh, that's Elvish in design. Like because we know what kind of curves or shapes.
Well, and they did that a lot for Fernando too, to give him reference when he was drawing. So they definitely shared a lot of concept art.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can imagine of Tevinter, because obviously we haven't seen Tevinter in the game, it's obviously in the comics. I can imagine they're like, okay, here's some Tevinter concept art.
Yeah, so that we got a lot of concept art that were broad concept art. Like here are the fashions of Tevinter. Like we've seen documents that are just Tevinter clothing laid out, or Tevinter architecture laid out that were vital for these three miniseries set in Tevinter. In the Imperium. So, but not a lore document. But we knew, for example, that the World of Thetis books described how Fenris was created very differently than how we had Fenris be created. So when we proposed a sarcophagus, we went to them with this would be a different way for him to have been created. Is that okay? And they were like, yes, and let's have fun designing it. And so that was that. And, so they know when the lore is being broken. Sometimes they're willing to replace what they have with what we have, as was the case with the sarcophagus. But more often they'll say, no, you can't do X. What about Y instead? Because that fits with what we have.
Are you monitored to avoid overall stories canon/lore inconsistencies, or are you free to explore other stories within the Dragon Age universe?
They definitely keep an eye on what we're doing.
Yeah.
So they're always, they seem very much, they have approached us with, we want people to be excited about what they write. So they're always like, bring the ideas to us, bring the stories to us. And then they just make sure that we're not coloring outside the lines. So to speak.
Yeah. Staying within.
They're less concerned with inconsistencies. So for example, when we ask, can we use Fenris? Their response isn't, well, that'll be inconsistent with the various people who do Fenris, but they did say 90% of the world states he's still alive. So yes.
Yeah.
So they do track that. They because they build their canon off of what the most popular choices are. Yeah. So when we mention Sir Aaron has a connection to the king, they say to us, the king is going to be Alistair, just so you know.
Yeah.
Because that's our world lore, because that was the most popular choice. And in this case, was also set up in the comic books that came out.
David Gaius comics, yeah.
So they try to avoid inconsistencies with other comics that draw from the default lore. So they'll sometimes tell us what their default lore is. I think where we got more pushback sometimes was when we would try to go to places where they were like, we're not looking back at that stuff. That's stuff from older stuff, and a lot of people have forgotten it, so don't worry about that. But that wound up earning us some praise. They're like, we can't believe you remember those characters.
I think let's get into the story writing. What have been some of the best moments / experiences of creating the comic series?
Character design, because Fernando is so good. That process of watching him, like we give him the notes, our initial thoughts, then he sends us designs and he sends them to BioWare, then we give notes, BioWare gives notes, and he revises them. It's like watching a character that you started to conceive in your head truly come to life as Fernando starts putting together the outfits, the weapon choices, and then BioWare is commenting on those outfits and weapon choices and color designs and color scheme. I remember at one point we had wanted a specific color scheme for a bandana to be worn on Autumn, and they were like, no, we're going for a very Tevinter color scheme with her.
Ooh.
Like BioWare, and we were like, got it. Like it was amazing. And then so the Autumn, the Mabari, moved in a different color direction than Autumn the Paunchy over here. And then Autumn, I think, honestly, you put your dog in a comic.
Oh, yes.
It's an indulgent move. It's an absolutely indulgent move. And so people could have been like, we can't believe these people put their own dog in the comic. And that's not how they responded. So the fans' reaction to Autumn has been super satisfying.
It's the best. It's been the best thing in the fandom for a while, to be honest. Seeing it was a real Autumn. Like, I think we should write a petition for BioWare. If Autumn's ever in any future game, whatever, real life Autumn should voice act in-game Autumn.
She's got such a tinny little tiny dog bark. She would be the most embarrassing Mabari if she sounded like her.
But I was going to say, going back to what we talked about earlier, just in terms of the role of the artist in creating a comic book, is honestly anytime pages would come in from Fernando as well. It's just such a joy to see how he envisions it and seeing the stories that we're laying out come to life.
Yeah, there are times that we've seen pages and they just... When we started writing, and we were writing on the show Arliss on HBO, there was a sense that when you would hear an actor say a line exactly the way you heard it in your mind, that was the victory, right? But there was also the surprise of an actor saying a line differently and it sounding even better than what you heard in your head.
Right.
because there's a reward of collaboration. And there's this wonderful blend with Fernando of exactly that. The pages that come back and they're exactly what you wanted them to be. And then the pages that come back that are completely different than what you imagined, but better than what you wanted them to be.
Yeah.
And so that process has been amazing.
It's seeing your stuff come to life, isn't it? You know, you've wrote it and you've created it, but then, you know, giving Fernando freedom to do whatever he wants and then seeing that come back, I can imagine it's incredibly rewarding as well. And for Fernando too.
And then I don't think we can properly give enough excitement to the day that Gideon Emery actually played one of our panels.
Absolutely. Oh, that was so good. Oh my god. And with Autumn as well. Oh, I love that. I had to put that in my video when I reviewed
two of my favorite things coming together, you know, Gideon Emery and Autumn, and it just and it's what Nunzio was just saying, like hearing that line, and so actually hearing Fenris's voice say it, it's like, oh my gosh. And then of course, you know, he embellished on it, making it even more amazing.
Did he call her like
honestly, we kind of wish we could go back and add the line that he added to the comic because it was so perfect. Wait a minute, you slobbering beauty.
Slobbering beauty, yeah. It was so amazing. Just to see the fact that even, you know, the voices behind the game are excited about this too, and they care about the universe as well. Like that for me is really exciting, just to see that they do care about it and they care about their characters and they want to add more stuff to them too. It was amazing. Speaking of characters, like Fenris leaving Hawk that you mentioned, and Nunzio, your own experience with your friends leaving grad school before you, and you know, you shared that you were both angry, but it was because they were leaving. What other pieces of yourselves have you put into these characters and stories?
We haven't been shy about mentioning that both of us in our lives have had to deal with loving somebody who's an alcoholic. And so Vaea's journey with Sir Aaron, I think, touches on a little bit of what each of us have had to deal with. It's a different journey entirely because Sir Aaron is his own person at this point in the creative process for us. But I think we were tapping into that sense. There was a person on the internet who was like, Vaea's being too supportive and she's enabling this. And clearly these people don't understand what it means to deal with an alcoholic. And of all the negative feedback that we've gotten in the comic, that was the only one that made me want to say, and apologies for the profanity, go fuck yourself.
No worries at all.
Because I absolutely know what it's like to love an alcoholic. And I absolutely know that tough love is important. But I also absolutely know that if the love is too tough, you create so much negative experience that the person is going to be more likely to drink, not less. And if you are too supportive, then they have no motivation to change. And so trying to find that middle spot to try and encourage someone to change, to make it clear you will be hurt if they don't change, but not make it all about you in a way that can make you toxic to them.
And also you don't always get it right. So
absolutely,
you know.
Absolutely.
And so putting that into Vaea's struggle, especially in, you know, once Olivia dies and sort of he starts spiraling, we put a lot of what we struggled with into what she struggled with. Yeah. And then I would say, strangely enough, I feel like Sir Aaron connects to stuff that I've been feeling a little bit, not alcoholic wise, because I don't really drink that much. But, you know, I teach now. We both teach, but I've also now become a chair of a department and a dean at this school. And so a huge portion of my life is given up to educating people about writing instead of actually writing. And I think that role of sort of sharing your war stories about your life experiences and somehow that being more important than the actual thing that you're doing. Nothing against writing these Dragon Age comics, but sometimes I feel like I reach more people teaching than I reach through writing. Right. And that's a strange thing because that wasn't the career path I set out to do. And so it's very different for Sir Aaron. It's like, I thought I could fix the world and now I can only fix the world by telling stories. No screenwriter thinks they can fix the world by writing a screenplay or by teaching people how to write a screenplay. But at that same notion of I had a journey for myself and now I mostly talk about that journey. That's something that I put into Sir Aaron, that first pass at the dialogue, because Christina fixed all that dialogue. But the first pass on Sir Aaron talking to Vaea about why he's drinking in Dark Fortress, I channeled a little of my own frustration sometimes when I look up and go, I'm 90% teacher and 10% writer, you know? Those would be things that we pulled out of real life.
No, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that as well, especially about, Sir Aaron and the alcoholism and just how you relate to it and putting that, obviously like that. The thing I love about Dragon Age is how emotive it is. And, you hear about David Gader and how he put his own story when his family found out that he was a homosexual and he put that into Dorian. And just how that scene when he confronts his father and how impactful it is that no one, if you hadn't gone through that situation, you couldn't relate to it, but you can because it's so powerful. It moves you, and you get a sense of that deeply in these characters too, in the comics, especially again with Fenris and leaving. I really, when you shared your story, I felt impacted by that. Going shit, and I do see that in the story too. You're like, wow, that's why, and it's to a T as well. Like obviously David Gader wrote Fenris originally, but that experience, and then with the relation to what Fenris is going through, it just fits perfectly, and it makes the reader go, shit. Like I feel that, I while some fans may not agree, or this isn't their Fenris or their romance Fenris, whatever, I completely understand how Fenris is feeling because it makes sense, and it should be canon. But yeah.
Well, one of the things I feel like anytime you're in a genre storytelling, I mean, the world is big and fantastical, and that's half the fun. But to ground it in real human emotions,
absolutely,
I think is what's really going to draw people in.
Absolutely, and I think that's what Dragon Age is about. It's about seeing his characters, and they're not just fantasy; they are real because of the emotions and the feeling and the real life situations that have gone into them. And that's what really defines Dragon Age. I think, at least. Okay, let's talk about the ending, because I know that everyone who's read Dark Fortress has a lot of questions. So let's go through this. Was the Solas / Dreadwolf reveal always planned as the ending of the entire series?
That's a complicated one.
It's a complicated question. Here's the thing.
That may be the one time where BioWare really sort of had to step in on lore and stuff, I think.
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Yeah.
From the beginning, we had planned that Solas was going to be in the end of the miniseries. And we pitched it to them that way, and they were okay with it. And then when we hit Dark Fortress and we were getting ready to start writing, we had mapped out where Solas was in the miniseries. And that was very different than what you saw. Solas was all over Dark Fortress when we wrote it. He was in issues 1 and 2 and 3.
Wow. Oh, shit.
Basically, there's a moment where Tenebris opens up in the current miniseries. Tractus walks out, and behind him there are 2 elves.
Yes.
We don't know for sure that that's what Fernando meant, because all of this stuff was pulled before Fernando ever saw a script.
Right.
But we initially planned for there to be 2 servants of Tractus Danarius who were secretly working for Fen'Harel.
Oh, shit.
And they see what's going on, and they were informing Solas, and Solas was like, all right, you're going to let this happen.
Oh, wow.
You're going to let this happen so we can see what it looks like. And the minute it goes too far, you're going to take that idol and you're going to come to me, and we're going to leave them to deal with their own consequences.
Oh, crap.
And Shirallas encounters them and figures out that they're working for Fen'Harel. And everything he does in that miniseries is to impress Fen'Harel to get him to join.
Wow.
And so in the 3rd issue, when he gets stabbed through by Fenris and then thrown, or kicked as it wound up being drawn, he went through the wall initially and found himself face to face with an Eluvian in the building, which they have been using to communicate with Fen'Harel the entire time.
Wow. Oh, bloody.
And
wow.
They have the idol in their hands, and Fen'Harel lets them through, and he runs up like, please, I did this for you. And Fen'Harel dismisses him as unworthy and closes the Eluvian.
Oh, wow.
And in that moment, he snaps and becomes the rampaging beast that you see in issue 3, with his mind is completely gone, because everything he did this for is taken from him. And so that's when and then when he comes out and he bursts through the wall and it knocks Tessa unconscious so that Vaea has to do the killing of Nelius. That was him coming back into the battlefield after not having been able to retreat with Fen'Harel in the initial storytelling. So we had it mapped. That was going to be in the 1st issue. The other thing was going to be in the 2nd issue. And this was going to be in the 3rd. And then we started doing page breakdowns. Like, can we make all this stuff fit? And it was too much stuff.
Yeah.
Then simultaneously, BioWare was like, we don't know how much we want you to have him speak.
Right.
Because if you put dialogue in Solas's mouth, what we're doing with him in the future is dependent on dialogue that you wrote.
Interesting.
They at the last minute were like, let's just cut the whole storyline. So the whole thing was cut. And at that point, we decided, they then said to us, and we didn't realize at the time it was going to be because of the way it wove into Tevinter Knights, they were like, just have a mage from this house leave with the idol. That's all we need you to do. So we're like, okay, is it okay if we make it Tractus himself? And they were like, sure. And that was it. And then we kept writing, and then we wrote the first issue, and we were writing the second issue, and we get back from them, hey, you can use Solas in the third issue, but don't have him say anything, just have him watching through the Eluvian.
Right.
So we put him back in. So we got back to where we started, but it was a much smaller story, and it was just, the idea is that he was able to keep an eye on what was going on here. How much of it he sees, we even as writers don't know because we put it back in on their request. But our initial thinking was that Eluvian, for those people who think that this makes Fenris, that makes Solas the most powerful man in the entire universe because he can spy on anyone through the Eluvian network, BioWare would need to tell you whether this is true. But we wrote it as if there was an Eluvian in the basement. And so that he can scry anything close to the Eluvian. So he sees Tractus leaving because Tractus is directly above, near the secret entrance to the place. And he sees Tessa and Marius because they're down on the shore right near the fortress. As soon as they move a little bit further, he won't be able to see them anymore. That's how we wrote.
It's like a proximity.
And so he's not limited to seeing what is reflected in the Eluvian. He has a bit more scrying ability. He can see things within an X number of yard radius. I don't want to give an exact radius. That's how we wrote it. Now, BioWare could turn around and say, nope, he could see everything. BioWare could turn around and say, nope, the Eluvian was moved up on the shoreline. They could say a lot of things that will make it fit with what they want. But I can only tell you what we wrote. When we put it back, we put it back under the assumption that the Eluvian we had in the more complex plotting was still sitting in the basement. And so that this ability, it's not that he can follow the idol, and it's not that he can see everywhere. It's that he can see things within a radius of an Eluvian.
Right. It's not that he's actually locating the idol. It's just the proximity of the Eluvian that makes it so he can...
Basically the equivalent of like a Farsight spell that he channels through the Eluvian. So it extends his range.
So feel free not to answer this, but is Never the End a tease for more comics or a tease for the future game?
Or simply a tease?
Fair. Absolutely fair.
I think it's more of a notion that, Dragon Age goes on. Maybe more comics, whether or not, Vaea and company are part of that. It's,
I think we also maybe put it in a little bit. I mean, mostly what we were trying to say is what Christina's saying now, which is that the story of the Dragon Age world, exploring Thetis, that's not going to end just because we stop writing in it. It's not going to end just because this might be the last story with Vaea in. That really was the literal thing that we put there.
Yeah, the journey's going to continue regardless.
But we also put it in there by way of sort of putting a little prayer out into the world that it's not the end for us or for Vaea.
Yeah. Which hopefully, it isn't the end.
You never know.
Yeah. What do you guys think the Red Lyrium idol is or resembles? Full on speculation. If you know what it is, feel free to answer. But what do you think it resembles?
Straight up, we have no idea. So we're not gonna play coy and say I can't tell you what we know. We have no idea.
Fair. I'm glad we're in the same boat then.
Speculate. I honestly don't know what it represents. I see a lot of people speculating on the imagery of it, and it all sounds valid to me. I plan on just sitting back and letting them reveal it to me because I just don't have enough evidence to say no, this is what I think it is.
Yeah, it's a complete enigma, to be fair. We're just speculating just to fill the time, but honestly, what the hell is it? It literally, it's a complete enigma. Do you think Marius and Tessa realized that they were speaking right in front of an Eluvian? And would they even know what an Eluvian is?
They absolutely would not know.
I was they would know.
Fair.
Going back to what we wrote, I don't think Tractus knew what it was.
Yeah.
We wrote that there was an Eluvian in his basement where he kept all the cool magic shit. But Tractus is a bit of a upstart. He doesn't know a lot of things. What he did was he dug deep into his daddy's research and found a way to bind a dragon. And on that level, he's a mad genius. Beyond that, he's a bit of a savant because he's only half mage. He wasn't raised by magisters. He's only recently come into power. So he's got a bunch of stuff that his daddy had in the basement, and he doesn't know what half of it does.
Sticking stuff together.
Which is a little frightening if you think about it.
In our thinking, there is an Eluvian in that basement, and that's where it is. So Tessa and Marius wouldn't even have seen it. But I'm not sure they wouldn't recognize what it would do. And Tractus didn't either.
That's fair. Okay, huge lore question that you guys might not even have an answer to because it wasn't addressed in the comics. Do you know who Gaius, the agent of Fen'Harel, masquerading as Magister Quintara, sold the Red Lyrium idol to, and what was the information Gaius retrieved in exchange?
Well, he sold it to the House Danarius, which
Yeah, he was urged to do so by someone he thought was an agent of Fen'Harel giving him his orders. The
Right.
someone he thought was an agent of Fen'Harel was Shirallas.
Okay, right.
That was the mission that Nenelius gave Shirallas to, because he knew that the idol was valuable. So Kintara stole it on the urging of Fen'Harel. Nenelius figured out that Kintara had it, but also figured out Kintara was a fake and was like, that means we can probably manipulate him. I need to send an elf to do that, and we're going to pretend we're part of this network that's working for Fen'Harel. So he had his ear to the ground enough to know that some elves were doing things on behalf of what he believed was a cult of Fen'Harel. I don't think Nenelius knew that Solas is out there. Right. I think he just thought a bunch of elves were getting very uppity on behalf of one of the former gods.
As elves do, yeah.
Yeah, as elves are wont to do in the eyes of Nenelius, who quite possibly is the most evil character we've ever written. But so he sent Shirallas to say, your god needs this information, so trade this idol to House Danarius to get it. So to our thinking, the information was information that Nenelius knew would be valuable to Kintara, but knew would never make it to the cult because it would be given to Shirallas. Right. So he probably gave up all the secrets of the Venatori plans on how they were going to use the Red Lyrium idol and what they were going to do next to get back in power. Because that is something he figured these elves would want to know.
But
he knew they would never find out because Gaius gave that information to Shirallas thinking, I've done my job.
Yeah, and that's it. It's done. Sorted. Can do whatever. And then obviously Gaius died anyway, so he probably thought his job was done.
As did Shirallas and Nenelius, so the whole thing is burnt to the ground.
Well, this is a harsh transition, but speaking of farewells, what was it like saying goodbye to Sir Aaron?
Oh.
I mean, it was definitely hard. It was hard for me. I love Sir Aaron. I think it crushed Nunzio.
Yes. That is all I can.
We've got a couple of playlists that we listen to when we're writing Dragon Age and songs we put together. And in particular, The Impossible Dream from Man of La Mancha is one that we associate with Sir Aaron. And Into the West, was that Lord of the Rings?
Yep.
The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Anytime he started thinking about Sir Aaron dying, he would play those two songs. So I could be in the other room and I'd hear one of them come on, and I was like, "Oh, Nunzio's mourning again."
Oh.
It was there were a couple of tweets over the time where I would tweet and I would say, "I just cried over something that I myself wrote. That's really vain, isn't it?" Things like that, and people would always try and guess what it was.
Yeah,
it was Sir Aaron. Every single time I tweeted it was Sir Aaron.
And talk about the experience when artwork comes in. When Fernando sent those pages, that was just punch to the gut in a good way, in the best possible way.
We have framed on our office wall in here. We have a printout of Letterless, just the colored version of the page where Sir Aaron is saying that everything that Vaea did, she did in his name. Let me take the punishment so she can live the life that she wants in Knight Errant. And she's listening around the corner. It's like two head to toe shots, him being earnest and saying, I'm willing to die for her crimes, and her making the realization, I'm not going to run away. I'm going to stay and do this because I can't let him die for my crimes. That page is framed. We have the art ready to print out and frame as well, where he dies in her arms. It is one of the most magnificent pieces of art that we've ever seen attached to anything we've written. Actually, that we've ever seen. So, yeah, it was hard. Once the art came in, the morning kicked up.
There was no going back.
There's no going back. And
there was less guilt, too, because you read your own script and you get upset and you cry about the death of a character. It's but I did that.
Yeah, you did that.
So when I feel emotional about it, I'm praising myself. And I don't want to do that. So I wouldn't do it all that often because it felt self-indulgent. Once the art came, then what I was crying at is how well Fernando drew it. And at that point, I could totally indulge and not be pompous.
Well, and we had, I think in the script, we wrote something about him being at peace. And that expression that Fernando captures on his face, the small smile, sort of that, he's accomplished everything that he wanted to accomplish. It was just beautiful the way Fernando captured that.
It was a great send-off too. Obviously, it's very traumatic, very sad, but a great send-off for Vaea, Francesca, and Fenris. to continue going, and the family that, you know, they built together. And I think that was just, it's sad, but the payoff and the fact that Fenris now has a quote family, it's great to see. And I'm glad that that was able to be achieved in the comic series, that despite all of it, Fenris, Francesca, Autumn and Vaea have a nice tight-knit friendship, that they can continue to do whatever they want to do. Switching gears, what are your opinions on the Dragon Age fandom? Do you engage with the fandom? To what level? Do you like it?
Nunzio definitely engages.
I engage a
with
lot.
fandom.
Yeah.
I think Christina has a sort of...
I love reading everything. I just don't always take the time to respond.
Well, you know, I think the fandom is great, but like any fandom, they can bite.
Oh, yeah.
And so the more you feed them, the greater the risk that you'll be bit. Christina's engagement level is based on that. Like, it's so great to see how excited they are. They are such thoughtful, engaged, wonderful fans. And if I don't engage a lot, I avoid the risk of one fan getting me as upset as that one fan got me with that comment about alcoholism.
For the most part, though, the fans have been great. I mean, working on a project that people are so passionate about, there's definitely the risk to upset people.
Yeah.
And you can't please everyone 100% of the time.
Absolutely.
So there are people who have been upset. But overwhelmingly, I feel like what we've seen has been very positive and very just exciting.
You know, and there's also, I think, a trend in fandom that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, about sort of almost headcanoning stuff, where there's a trend in fandom where you imagine certain things that in your mind are built completely logically out of the material that you were presented with. And if the material itself, the franchise itself, goes left where you thought they would go right, or vice versa, they get angry.
Yeah.
Right? We've seen that Star Wars fandom basically cannibalizes itself over stuff like this. There are people who get very frustrated if what we do with Fenris doesn't match their headcanon. They're not nearly as toxic as the Star Wars fans were about Rey's origins or Reylo or any of that other stuff that really took that trilogy, kind of imploded fan-wise, and then it took Solo down with it as a standalone movie. Like it really, and it took The Mandalorian to get the fandom sort of united again.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't see that with this fandom. I see a lot of the same types of concerns where this isn't what I saw, but everyone seems to be much more polite about it. Everyone seems to be much more, I've seen people who are like, no, I want no part of these comics because they do something that I don't care about. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's like, if you want no part of it, how am I supposed to be mad at that? Like, you're a fan, you engage with the stuff you want to engage with, and you disengage. If you continue to gripe about it online, my response will be, well, you're giving up an awful lot of your time and energy for something you say you don't want to engage with, but whatever. It's when you start review bombing or there's death threats to actors, or we haven't had any of that stuff.
Good.
We haven't had anybody get upset about Fenris to the point where they've picked a fight with us. They don't.
Good.
And so they see it differently, and I disagree with them and they disagree with me. And some of them are like, and it's still a good comic, but I'm never going to agree with what you did. And I can really respect that, because then they're able to even compartmentalize and enjoy at least other parts of the narrative.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that level, I think this is one of the best fandoms I've ever seen.
Oh, good.
Because I think the pitfalls of fandom are the pitfalls of fandom, not the pitfalls of Dragon Age specifically.
Right. Right.
And I think some people fall into them, but they tend to be nicer even when they do.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. As someone who is in this fandom quite dramatically, I do appreciate that the fandom overall is nice, even while we are waiting for the next game. But we're respecting the material around us and seeing when there is content, and if people have issues,
I think one of the most fun things with this fandom is seeing all the people who do fan art and who want to draw Vaea or things like that. I love seeing all the drawings that people do. Yes,
and all the Fenris art, everything, and Sir Aaron, all of it. And all these unique characters that you guys have created, and then seeing fans just go wild with fan art. I can imagine it's amazing. And seeing
That's
it
a lot
myself.
of fun.
Yeah. Fun question. How do you pronounce Vaea? 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 Are you guys bothered by the pronunciation?
How we pronounce and how others pronounce have been very different. And she is a character who exists in print. So I'm sort of like, I'm loath to tell people you're wrong. But we pronounce it Vaea.
Yeah.
In conversations with BioWare, they have pronounced it Vaea.
Oh, okay.
So I think if she does ever turn up in a game, it'll be Vaea, but in my mind, it's going to stay Vaea. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's absolutely.
And I think it's mostly at this point because they created Teia.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like if she's Vaea, then she won't sound the same, and it'll increase the odds that they use her in the game.
Yeah.
It is interesting though when you create a character with a non-common name and it's in print because there's no chance to sort of codify what it's going to be what everyone brings to it.
And somehow it has came to be just everyone saying Vaea as opposed to Vaea, which is obviously what you guys prefer.
It's a real name. The thing was, I had a student in a high school program who had the name, and I thought it was a really cool name, and then I didn't think about it for years. And then I was creating a character for a tabletop RPG that was going to be the basis eventually for her. And I saw that name in one of my old emails, and I was like, this is an amazing name. I'm going to use it. And Christina was like, and how is it pronounced? I'm like, I have no memory of it. I don't remember saying to the students, good work today, Vaea. So then I just decided Vaea was the way to go. For all I know, the student is listening to this interview and goes, it's Vaea, you dumbass.
If you are that student, please comment down below. Fun question. If Vaea, Francesca, Marius, Tessa, and Calix appeared in the next game, and you could have any voice actor, who would you like to voice act them?
That's tricky because the voice actors we use are actors that we know from live action. Not like we play a lot of games and we know voice actors from the games, and we love certain voice actors. So there's different answers if you're asking people who work in voice acting versus whose voice do you hear in your head. Because
I'd say who's voice
Vaea for me is Freema Agyeman from Doctor Who, specifically as Martha.
Oh, I love Doctor Who. Yes. Oh, she would be amazing.
She was the visual reference we gave. At this point, Vaea tracks much younger than Freema is these days. Yeah. And so, who was it that you had said she was in the Hunger Games and in The Hate You Give?
Oh, right.
Amanda Stenberg.
Thank you. I was totally blank.
Would be who Christina had proposed recently, but it's always going to be Freema in my head because I love Freema. So, Francesca's gone round and round and round, but as pure voice actor that I know works with BioWare, Ali Hillis could do Francesca.
Oh, yes.
Any day of the weekend, twice on Sunday.
I see that now. I could see that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Marius, would we need a voice actor? How often does he talk?
Grunts. Just grunts.
I don't know for Marius.
That's a tough one.
Dante Bosco, baby. Zuko.
Yeah, that's it.
Because I would love if the minute Marius opened his voice, he sounded like Zuko and everybody fell in love. Gideon Emery would be great for that too, since everybody falls in love whenever he opens his mouth.
And then Calix. Anyone for Calix?
When we pictured him, he was Sean Teal from The Gifted. That's who we pictured. As we wrote him, he's been much dorkier. And so I think Will Friedle, Ron Stoppable from Kim Possible. And as for Tessa, Liz Sroka, who does Tali.
Oh, yeah. Oh, very cool. Very cool.
If I'm going voice actors.
Yeah.
The only one that I would draw the line and say, no, not famous for voice acting, but I still want would be Vaea as Freema Agyeman.
Okay, well, BioWare, Doctor Who, Vaea, go for it. They love Doctor Who actors and actresses. Like Gareth David Lloyd, Torchwood, Meryl, Torchwood. Yeah. I know Patrick Weeks based David Tennant's Doctor Who on Solas, so hey, it could happen. Inspiration's right there. Most important question, what are each of your favourite Taylor Swift songs?
My favorite Taylor Swift song is probably not her best song, but it's my favorite when people get on my nerves and it's Shake It Off.
Hell yeah.
I like whenever something's bothering me, I can put that song on and I'm happy with it. Stuff.
I was going to say, along those lines, I find myself quoting "You Need to Calm Down" quite frequently.
Often to our dog.
Oh yeah, usually to Autumn. But I basically love all of 1989, and my favorite song on there is "Clean," actually, which I don't think is one people mention a lot, but that's my favorite.
So we'll go into the final questions, and that is, without saying too much, if BioWare gave you guys the go-ahead for more comics, what plot direction would you like to go in? If any, you don't even need to say any that you would like. Ideally, it could just anything whatsoever. We
have some specific plots in mind for adventures for Vaea and what happens to her in the wake of all this, and whether or not she gives the letter to King Alistair. So does she become a knight or not?
Yes.
When we rebuilt after Blood Riding became Blue Wraith, we rebuilt the proposal for Dark Fortress. And then we rebuilt it one more time when we pulled Solas out of it. And at the end of it, we listed future adventures for this group. Because once we had the conversation with them about retooling Blue Wraith, we knew we had a group of 4. And they were very engaged with us in saying, yes, that is a perfect adventuring party with those 4. So they're very engaged with the idea of those 4. So we shot out some ideas, 3 different story ideas for adventures they would go on. That could be another trio of miniseries that got collected. And they didn't agree to do anything. There's no promises. There's no anything. But they were like, these are along the lines of the kind of stuff we'd want you to do if we're going to do more. So we know they have a vague general interest in those stories. So we have 3 stories, and then it would depend on where we got to put it chronologically. If we're allowed to make it pretty close to the end of Dark Fortress, then those 3 adventures would happen connected to a funeral wake for Sir Errant, where characters from all across Thedas come to honor this dead hero, and then they give the quests, and the characters would go off and do the thing, and then come back and see what else had happened in there, and then go on the next one. While they're dealing with those 3 adventures, they're making up their mind, like Vaea's trying to decide, am I going to give this letter? And then if she does give the letter, what would happen in response? Fenris would be debating, I have to free slaves, and I can't do that down here. How long do I keep traveling with these people? Because I have something that I want to do that is important, but I also now have this group that I'd like to not be the guy who abandons them.
Understandably, yeah.
And then Francesca would get word that there's a spot in the magisterium for her, since she is the last surviving Invitus. And
cool
so she'd have to decide whether she's going to stay south or go back north.
Oh, that'd be really cool. So plenty of potential.
And if they tell us, no, you've got to check in with those characters 3 years later, odds are we would have those characters have made those choices in a way that separated them, and then use the 3 adventures to bring them back together.
It'd also be cool too. Plenty of potential.
So that, without spoiling what those adventures are per se.
Yeah, but that's what the arc could potentially involve.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any existing characters that you would both love to write a comic about, or a little small miniseries about, or already existing in the universe?
Well, in those 6 ideas that we initially proposed, we pitched one that was about Lily, the Templar who had the affair with Jowan.
Oh yes, yes.
And
wow. Way back.
They were just like, Lily and Jowan might be too far back right now. Don't do that. But that'll give you an idea of how deep a cut we go to sometimes when we're
That's amazing.
We wanted to write a story about how Lily, because she was sent to a prison because of her involvement with Jowan, and then during the Mage Templar War, that prison would have been destroyed, and she was now out on the loose somewhere, trying to live a quiet life. And then somebody comes to her and says, you remember your ex-boyfriend, Jowan? He's making trouble again, and we're putting together a team to deal with it, and we need you. She's trying to pretend he never existed. That was the pitch that we had, and I was quite fond of it.
Yeah. Any chance to see Jowan again?
Blood Lily.
Oh, it might have been. I think we both are really fond of Isabela. She'd be really fun to write a story for.
And in those 3 ideas we have, one of them has a central role for Isabela in it.
Oh, that'd be amazing too. I mean, she is got the Felicity Armada. She's up north anyway. She's got a ship. Plenty of potential for whatever she could do. Like
another one of the 3 ideas that we proposed to them has Lace Harding in a central role. So that would be another person that we would try to write.
Huge fan.
We'd want to do more with Varric.
Yes.
I would love to get a chance to write Meryl.
Oh, yeah. Very cool.
I wish we'd have a chance to write for Bethany, but I don't think we're allowed to go anywhere near a Hawk sibling because there's so many variables.
Yeah.
Which sibling died on the way out? Which then the one that lived, did they die in the Deep Roads? Are they a Grey Warden or doing something else? There's so many variables. I think they want to stay away from doing any, quote, canon choice on that. Because most of the other things they do canon choices on have 2 or 3 options at the most. So probably not get a chance to write for Bethany, but I'd love to write for Bethany. Nathaniel Howe, maybe?
Nathaniel. Another fan favorite.
And maybe another chance to do something different with Valena and Sigrun. I think I've moved away from that story idea enough that I don't want to kill Valena, and I don't want to say that Sigrun's calling is coming soon, even though I know mathematically it's probably true.
It's probably around, yeah. Do you think that if you guys didn't get a future miniseries, would you write these stories on Tumblr anyway, or would you just not? Do you think you would try to? Because that's what David Gator did once he moved on from BioWare. He still wrote a story about Dorian, although it's fan fiction. He is the lead writer of Dorian, so it kind of makes sense.
It's interesting. I think I wouldn't want to close the door with BioWare by writing something that would be tagged as fan fiction and therefore move into a different category. Because then suddenly if they hired us again, we would either have to do something different or they would be officially declaring fan fiction canon, which is a slippery slope they don't want to go down. So if it became clear we would never do it, we would probably be more willing to talk about what those story ideas were, per se, and let people imagine and let people write the fan fiction versions of those stories. Would be probably more how I would want to engage the fan fiction, because I love fan fiction. I think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I as someone who's officially writing stuff, I don't know that I want to move into that camp if there's a chance that I can continue to officially.
Yeah, and if that door's still open as well, why not, Okay, final question, and this is just fun speculation and taking nothing concretely. How would you both react to seeing your comic characters in a future game?
I would probably squeal with joy. I mean, it would be very, very cool. But probably won't happen. I feel like the most we could hope for is maybe they like turn up on a war table or something like that.
Yeah.
But it would be amazing.
Even just the mention of Vaea in a codex, or I have a friend who's in. Where's Calix? Is he in the Calix? Is in the Elephant Forest? He's in a settlement in the Elephant Forest, right?
Calix right now went back to Fort Verdun on the edge of the Elephant Forest. We have pretty big plans for him that play into those three ideas that we had.
Oh, cool.
So we know where we want him to go, because it broke our heart a little bit to get rid of Calix, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we know what we want to do with him, and they're pretty big plans, but they haven't even gone anywhere near being run by BioWare. They weren't in those. No, they were in those proposals. Yeah. But it was the end point that we had in mind for him in those proposals.
I don't remember.
Basically, the short version is if it's set at the funeral and each of them is trying to figure out, the one who brings Francesca the news is Calix. So he would come to the funeral, and we would discover, just in a minor spoiler sense, just how phenomenally successful he'd made himself in a few short weeks. Never bet against Calix.
Yeah.
Which is exciting anyway, because I liked his character, and I know that many of us did too. But honestly, thank you guys so much. Regardless of the future of the comics, I just want to say thank you both for the amazing journey that you've already created with these comics. Characters like Vaea, Autumn, and Sir Aaron, they're going to stay with fans like myself even after the next Dragon Age comes out, regardless if they're in it or if they're not. They do mean a lot to us, and I really appreciate. Like, I have fell in love with Vaea just from her, just since Knight Errant. I would say, I'm not going to pick favourites, but Knight Errant in particular, just for a brand new character to fall in love with in the Dragon Age universe, I have strong ties to that comic because I love the origin story of it. Your expansion of the Dragon Age universe has been tremendous, and it's actually just kept the series alive the past, 4 or 5 years. And yeah, it would be amazing to see more from you both because of how talented your work is and how much you both love the series, and you can just tell by spending an hour and a half talking to me just about your love for it. It really is. It's infectious, and I would love you guys to be in creating even further just because of how amazing you both are. But if this is the end, at least it has been a really epic comic run with you two helming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's very kind.
That's how we try to approach it too. It's like if this is the end of the ride for us, boy, it was a fun ride. Yeah, and we did get to create stuff that is a part. And God, I would just love even a codex entry that talks about the first Elven Knight of Ferelden. Oh, that would make me so happy.
Yes, absolutely.
Would I be happier if they did like a DLC that had your character go down to Ferelden and work with the first Elven Knight of Ferelden? Yes, I would. But anywhere, and War Table, wherever it might be. But if its only place in Thedas is these comics, it's in Thedas now, and we're excited about that. We put these pieces in there, and honestly.
And that's been amazing to leave our mark on Thedas. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And her journey in particular just feels like if we walked away now, it'd be a good journey for her. Could we pick it up and run all sorts of directions with it? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But a lot of good endings work that way, And as a writer, you want an ending that you can say, all right, job done, or an ending that you can say, can't wait to get back to it. And this is both, and that's really nice. So
yeah. It's bittersweet. You could leave it as is, but there's also room where you could continue, obviously, depending on what BioWare want to do.
And also, I want to thank you for how much you've supported our stuff from the beginning. It's been exciting to hear you speculate and to watch you geek out when I comment on your YouTube post.
Yeah. I apologize for my 2018 content because, oh my goodness, the person I was. No, I know, but I know obviously to you it's great, but I remember watching those videos be like cringe. Now I think now I can watch.
Nunzio would always come running into the room with his iPad, being like, Jackdaw's latest thing is up. Come
Oh no, like I'm okay with my content now, but back then I was like, oh no, like what was this? But no, I really appreciate that. Like the fact that you guys even care to watch my videos is amazing to me, and that's why I wanted to reach out to you and do this in the first place, because you guys are just as much as fans as I am, and I think just having that like connection in this podcast is just a great way to just geek out about it and share that, because I feel like I've known you guys for like 4 years, and I just wanted to have that final conversation. I'm just so glad that you guys are the first people from BioWare that I'm speaking to as well, with associations to BioWare, because it's just I feel like we have bonded over the entire journey, and I really do appreciate that.
No problem.
If you are sat at home and you have listened to this entire podcast and you have not read Dark Fortress, the hardcover book is releasing on the 28th of September. You can either pick up the hardcover, or you can pick up each issue respectively on Amazon Kindle or on other bookstores online. I highly recommend checking out each of these comics, especially given all of the lore that we've been able to digest today. But honestly, Nunzio and Christina, I really, really appreciate both of you coming on for this, and you can follow Nunzio and Christina on their own Twitter platforms, linked down below, and also their Tumblr page if you'd like to check out more of their Dragon Age related posts. But until the next one, guys, thank you so much, Nunzio, thank you so much, Christina, and I will see you guys in the next one.